Good evening, everyone. Welcome to my lecture recital. My name is Eloise Kim, and tonight I will be presenting on the Tre Sonetti del Petrarca by Franz Liszt, the three Petrarch sonnets. So Franz Liszt was a very prolific composer for pianists. He wrote a lot of music for piano, and they are huge, attractive audience pleasers, especially because Franz Liszt himself was really a rock star pianist for his time. So his pieces really portrayed that aspect of his pianism with a lot of fast octaves, chromatic passages, and just anything with virtuosic brilliance. However, with these Petrarch sonnets, they are a little bit different in style. First of all, these are sonnets, which means love poems, set to music. So therefore, the style is, and the poetry is about unrequited love, actually. And in the handouts with you tonight, I have the English translations, in which is going to be the order of how we present it with the vocalist later tonight. And interestingly, with this sonnets, not only is there a piano solo version, but there's also vocal versions available. And so there's vocal version with the vocalist singing the text of the music, and then the piano solo versions as well. Another interesting thing to note about Franz Liszt as a composer is that he revised several of his works. So the vocal versions actually go through revisions as well as the piano solo versions too. So there's actually a total of 12 individual sonnets that could be performed out there. For tonight, right after my lecture, I will be presenting the revised solo piano versions, and then there will be a short intermission, and our guest tenor today, Matthew Miles, and I will be presenting the high tenor and piano vocal version, which is basically the very original version of the vocal set. Now, I would like to talk about Franz Liszt as a composer. His years are from 1811 to 1886. Right there is young Liszt when he was a child. He studied with Carl Czerny, pictured on the left. He studied composition with him. Antonio Salieri, pictured in the middle over here. And then Adam Liszt is also a very prominent figure in Franz Liszt's life. Adam Liszt indeed was Franz Liszt's father. Adam Liszt worked for the Esterhazy family, which is a very powerful family that Joseph Haydn actually used to work for. And he had the many connections to able to start Franz Liszt from a young age, this virtuosic piano performer career. And Franz Liszt, just like many other composers out there, was a young prodigy. And his teachers know that, so that is to have said that actually his teachers did not receive any lesson fees while teaching him because they were so proud of being able to teach such a genius. And Adam Liszt knew about this, about his son, so he wanted to create Franz Liszt to become like the next Mozart and take him on these concert tours across Europe. And so from at the age of 8, Franz Liszt was already touring across Europe and performing concerts here and there. This was a good experience for Franz Liszt because he was able to receive the different influences of each of the culture in the countries he visited and later applied this to his music. Unfortunately, Adam Liszt dies when Franz Liszt is only 16 years old. So at the young ages of 16, Franz becomes the headhold of his family. So he has to quit his performance career for about 4 years and actually devotes those 4 years to teaching in order to make a living for his family. However, after those 4 years, he goes back to the Parisian life and starts performing at salon concerts in which he meets a very important woman in his life, Countess Marie Diogold. They meet in the year of 1833. And Franz Liszt was actually performing at one of the salon concerts that her friend, Countess Marie's friend, was hosting. And Countess Marie was actually a married woman at the time. She was married to a man who was 15 years older than herself, but she was unhappily married with him, and she had 2 children with that man. And when she sees Franz Liszt, it's first sight love, and she ends up actually leaving her husband for Franz Liszt. And then they traveled together to Switzerland and Italy during the years of 1835 to 39, which is the peak years of their relationship. And this is important to note because this is what forms the Years of Pilgrimage, the 3 books that are a huge set for piano works. The first book is titled Switzerland because it is piano works that were influenced by the nature and the literal works that he was influenced by. In Switzerland, book 2 is titled Italy, book 3, France. And our Petrarch sonnets, the piano versions, are found in the book 2 Italy set because Petrarch, our poet, is an Italian medieval poet from the 14th century. Another important thing to note about Countess Marie is that she often is known under the name Daniel Stern. She was a very important writer for her time. However, because she was female, she was not allowed to use the name Marie as her, so she uses a male named Daniel Stern. And I encourage you to look her up sometime because she writes very interesting things about her relationship with Franz Liszt. Now I'd like to talk about our poet, Francesco Petrarch, who wrote these sonnets that I will be presenting today. Francesco Petrarch's years are from 1304 to 1374, and he and Franz Liszt, interestingly, have a lot in common. They were both constant travelers, they loved traveling, and they fell in love with unattainable women, specifically married women all the time. And indeed, his sonnets are actually dedicated to this lady named Laura, pictured on the left side here. And however, for Petrarch, his love was never returned from Laura, so the poetry is about unrequited love. Now I would like to talk about the different versions of the sonnets. I mentioned how they went through revisions. So in 1838, this is when the first versions of the voice and piano was first written, and it's in the order of actually 104, which is titled Pace non trovo, 47, Benedetto Soggiorno, and then 123, which is titled I vidi in terra angelico costumi. That's the very last one. And this is written for high tenor and piano, which I will be presenting later tonight after intermission. And around the same time, he wrote the very first versions for piano solo too. And then in the high tenor and piano versions, those are all in the key of A flat major. So please, this is important to know because that's going to change when he makes the revisions. In the 1850s, he starts revising those piano solo versions. He does several compositional techniques. He takes out a lot of things and goes through a lot of revisions. And in 1858, the revised piano solo versions is what is found in our second year of pilgrimage set, and that is what I will be performing tonight right after this lecture. In 1861 to 68, he revises the voice and piano version, and now it's done for baritone and piano. And the keys move down from 104, it moves down to the key of E major from A flat. For 47, it moves down to the key of D flat major from A flat major. And then 123 to the key of F major from A flat major. And the piano solo works are actually in very similar keys to the revised works. So 47 is in D flat, 104 in E, and then 123 actually stays in the key of A flat major as the high tenor and piano version. So in comparison to what was happening to Franz Liszt's life is what on the right column here. In 1838 to 39, this was the peak of Franz Liszt and Countess Marie's relationship. And during the year of 1839, he was actually starting back in his virtuosic piano career. So the very first versions of these sonnets are much more virtuosic. It shows up a lot of the pianist's technical ability in comparison to the revised versions. In 1844, he takes a position, very important position in Weimar as a Kapellmeister there. And there he has an affair with this lady named Princess Caroline, who again was a married woman at the time. And this not only creates drama with Princess Caroline and her husband, but also an end to his relationship with Countess Marie and his family right there. In 1859, unfortunately, Daniel, which is one of the sons of Countess Marie and Franz Liszt, dies at the young age of 19. And this brings a very huge shock to Franz Liszt's life. And he starts to regret many of the choices he made, especially because he was not there for his family with Countess Marie and his 3 children with them for a very long time because he was so busy doing his performance career as a pianist. And he starts to really dislike the brilliant life that he once had as a pianist. And he decides to devote the rest of his life to religions, in which in 1861 he leaves his position in Weimar and then starts receiving religious orders from 1865. And during this time period of the 1850s to 1860s, that's when he starts revising many of his own compositions as well. So it was really in relationship to his life choices, and then he was not happy with some of the compositional choices he was making, in which he actually there's a quote by him saying that he wanted to take out all the repetitions and anything that was too ornate to the human ear. So the revised versions in general are much more calmed down in some sense. It still has the same amount of passion, but much more calmer and mature. So as you notice of the years over here, it's from 1838 all the way to 1883. If you remember Franz Liszt's life years dates from my beginning slide, his life years are from 1811 to 1886. So you can see that these 3 Petrarch sonnets really took up almost his entire lifespan. Now I'd like to talk about, I'm going to show over here the different versions and some examples. So this is a voice and piano version of the Sonnet 47, the Benedetto Soggiorno. As you can see, the arrows point to when the vocalist enters. And they are actually about the same length, the piano accompaniment before the vocalist enters. However, the piano accompaniment for the first version is much more stretched out. It sounds much warmer and pianistic. And it's almost like a piano solo before the vocalist enters. However, in the final version, first of all, it's now in the key of D flat major rather than A flat major. The accompaniment part is much more simplified, and the rhythm is changed, and in some ways, the pianist is not as important as it was in the very first version. This is the piano solo version. I'm actually going to play this excerpt of the first introduction. These 2 are exactly in the same harmonies. The chords, harmonies-wise, is the exact same. However, the left version, you can see, first of all, visually there are more notes. It's more thicker chords and texture in comparison to what we have on the right. So I will play these 2 excerpts. The first one I will play is the first version of these sonnets. And now I will play the revised version of those same 4 bars. As you can see, there are pretty much the exact same harmonies. However, it's much more controlled passion-wise in the revised version. And I would first like to talk about the vocal version of 104. This is actually the most changed among the 3 sonnets. So as you can see, the very top picture over here, I want to focus on the vocal part, the high tenor part, the Pace non trovo, the same exact text. The music changes in the baritone part, not only key-wise, but for the very first version, it starts with this very dramatic recitative-like, and then he continues. Over in the baritone version, pictured in the middle, it's this tune instead. Interesting enough, this is actually the tune of the second strophe of this poem, which is Tal ma prison, you keep me in prison, which is the English literal text. And that's the main theme used throughout the piano solo version of 104. And now for the 104 voice and piano version continued, I want to note on this huge cadenza that he writes for the pianist in the very first version. And I put little brackets here. So from here to here is in between the first strophe and the second strophe of the poem. The second strophe, Talma Prison, is entered right there from the tenor. However, if you see the baritone version over here, there is a bracket. The same bracket is now reduced to just 4 measures. And as soon as the singer finishes the first strophe, there's only 4 measures of piano accompaniment, and then comes immediately the Talma Prison text right away. And now to talk about the 104 piano solo version, I want to give an example of just the very first page. So this entire first page right here, very cadenza-like once again. So the left hand is a lot of repeated notes. And this is actually supposed to be played in octaves. And there's a lot of chromatic harmonies in the right hand. And so this whole page is actually reduced to those about 4.5 measures. So which is, it still has the same amount of passion. You will hear it later tonight. But it's much more controlled in some sense. And there's less of the virtuosic brilliance that he inserted for the very first version. Now, for the 123, I would like to talk about the accompaniment part first for the voice and piano version. So in the very first version, pictured on the left, there is this warmth underneath the singer. The singer is continuing to sing, and there's absolutely no rest going on except for that little 8th rest right there, but there's continuous sound underneath the vocalist as the singer is singing, so it sounds like this. And this continues to be underneath the singer. However, for the revised version now, it's going to be in the key of F major. And there's this rest in between the pulsing triplets. And then he goes on. In this one, it makes the singer a little bit more exposed for the baritone version, rather than there's this continuous warmth in the very first version of the vocal. Now I would like to talk about the piano solo version. So in comparison, the arrows are pointing to the melody line. The melody line is going to stay exactly the same. I'm going to play a little bit of the revised version right now, and I would like you to take a look at the very left while I'm playing this one. This whole 8th underneath is completely omitted and then revised to those rolled chords that you just heard. Now I would like to talk about each of the individual sonnets and what it's about, as well as some of the compositional techniques and text painting he uses to express the text of the poetry. So Sonetto 47, and in your handouts you have all 3 of the poems, and I have it in the order of how we will be presenting with the high tenor tonight. So in the piano solo version, however, I'm going to be presenting 47 first, and then 104 and 123. 47, titled Benedetto Soggiorno, the literal English text, English translation for that means, blessed be the day. And this is when he is reminiscing about the first time, the first day, the moment he met Lady Laura and fell in love with her out of first sight love. And in order to emphasize those words like giorno, meaning day, mese, meaning month, and then he goes on to the next measure saying l'anno, meaning year. Notice how he starts a pickup of an eighth rest, quarter note, and then an eighth note in order to place all those on those particular beats. So I'm going to play a little bit of this excerpt. So my right hand is going to play the tenor parts, and I'll start with a little bit of the piano accompaniment. Each beat over here is detto, and then giorno, which means day, and then mese, meaning month, and then l'anno, meaning year. In this high tenor version, the meter is in 4/4, so there's this 1, 2, 3, 4 beating going on. However, in the piano solo version, it's now in the key of D flat major, the meter is in 6/4, which gives a little bit of a different feel. Talk about the use of the augmented triad. So these chords don't necessarily spell an augmented triad. However, the roots of each of the measures spell an augmented triad, which I will explain. So this 4 measures is what I played earlier today when I compared the two of the original version and the revised solo version of Sonnet 47. And this one, over here, the first measure spells an A major chord, in which the root will be A. And then the next measure, it's a second inversion, but spells a C sharp major chord, in which the root will be C sharp. And then it moves to F major, where the root being F. So A, C sharp, and F. And harmonically, that's A, C sharp, and E sharp, which means augmented triad. Augmented triad simply means a chord that is stretched out and has a certain color to it. And this was a very romantic compositional technique that Franz Liszt used in his works. And as I notated, this Sonnet 47 is in the key of D flat major. However, in those 4 bars, you can't tell what is that key we are in. There's a little hint of A major, a little hint of C sharp, a little hint of F. So this technique is very similar to what the Romantic period artists were going through. And it was a trend at the time to, as a Romantic artist, you're always a little bit lost in your path and trying to find your path, and he depicts that with these frequent key changes. And then he uses some text painting again for where it says lacrime. Lacrime means tears in Italian, and the singer sings this chromatic laying. And that in the piano solo part is also shown. So he inserts that same chromatic passage in the piano solo part as well. Now 104. 104 is possibly the most passionate poem of the 3. And it has a lot of agitation with the text itself. Pace non trovo, that means I find no peace. And he goes on to say, but I have no arms for war. And I fear, I hope, and then I burn and I freeze like ice. So there's this constant juxtaposition in the text of opposite words, in which it kind of portrays the human mind of agitation and emotional distress and not knowing what to do with his emotions for this lady named Laura. And he depicts that by the very first few measures of the piano solo part with these chords that constantly seem to never resolve. Apache non trovo sung by the tenor. And as I mentioned, the Tama Prashon theme is the main theme of this 104, the tune, and he uses that in the climatic passages as well. So this is in the second strophe after Tama Prashon. There's a text where it says, Ibramo di perir, meaning I long to perish, and then it continues saying, yet I beg and beg for aid. And my right hand actually doubles with the tenor, so I'm going to play the accompaniment part. And then for the piano solo, he changes this to the key of E major, the same climatic. For our final sonnet, sonnet 123. Again, it's him reminiscing about Laura, but now at this point he knows that his love cannot be returned back because she is a married woman and she does not love him back at all. And he talks about how her beauty is, like, compares her to basically nature aspects. In one of the texts he says, angelic and powerful enough to move the mountains, still the river, and even make the sun jealous. Again, a very romantic use of the text. And Liszt portrays this with a human sigh with the descending fifths over here noted. And I will play this in a second. And it's very Chopin nocturne like this very beginning. And the melody line is what does the F to B flat as human sighs that continues throughout the piece. Portraying the human side of his unrequited love. And very neat text painting he uses is over here, where he says, ombre fumi, parsoni ombre fumi. These means now I can only see her in my dreams, which is parsoni. And then ombre, shadows, and then fumi, which means smokes. Dreams, shadows, and smokes. And right after the singer sings this line, the pianist actually follows right along, really creating this shadow effect. And I will play that example. So this is parsoni, ombre, which means shadows, and then fumi, which means smokes. And then right after the pianist plays, B flat to E flat is a descending fifths, portraying that human side once again. Okay, so now this concludes my lecture. So I will now be presenting the 3 solo versions, which is the revised versions of the sonnets. And you can look in your handouts. I will be presenting in the order of how the revised ones were written. So 47 will be first. and then 104 and 123. And I will ask you to hold your applause till the very end of the last sonnet so that you can enjoy the journey of how one sonnet falls to each other. Thank you very much, and I'll get set up.